Welkom, we hebben het academisch half uurtje. Bienvenue, nous avons de nieuwe academie aujourd'hui. Nous sommes en plein développement. We zijn een volle ontwikkeling als nieuwe onafhankelijke loge. Comme branche indépendante, nous sommes en plein développement. Il y a de Russophones, de francophones, de Nederlandophones. Er zijn Russisch sprekende, Frans sprekende en Nederlands sprekende. Russisch ga ik niet vertalen. Zijn er Frans sprekende? Est-ce qu'il y a des francophones qui undergont une traduction de l'anglais vers le français?
De temps en temps, on va.
Oui. De temps en temps.
Pas toujours, mais ça dépend. Et puis parfois les mots.
Et want fantastisch. Alors, de temps en temps, j'ai déjà donné sommaire où Jean-Louis peut venir mais tu dois te changer de place, Jean-Louis.
Oh, le jeu, j'entendais.
Mais il y avait Andy, hein?
Je vais essayer, si ça ne va pas, Jean-Louis va reprendre le devant. Als het vertaling in het Frans niet gaat, gaat Jean-Louis dat doen. Nu stel ik u voor, meneer Maitreya uit India. Je vous présente monsieur Maitreya de l'Inde, qui habite très près du quartier général de la Société C.V.K à Madras, Chennai. Hij woont vlakbij het hoofdkwartier van de Theosofische Vereniging in Chennai, Adyar. En hij is gespecialiseerd in theosofische onderwerpen en Indiaanse filosofie en religie. Il est spécialisé dans des sujets de la philosophie indienne et des religions hindoues. Et il va nous éclairer, hij gaat ons verlichten het onderwerp van yoga, de essentie van yoga in theosofisch licht. L'essence du yoga dans la vue théosophique. I spoke in 2 languages, but I hope you understood.
Yeah.
So interesting. The floor is all yours.
I would like to thank all of you, brothers and sisters, and very particularly Brother Jan Kepler for inviting me this evening. You don't need to translate. I think this is the 18th or 17th or 18th country that I have been speaking in various theosophical audiences, and I'm indeed very happy to be in Brussels. The first time I came here was in 1993. You have a beautiful country, and I am happy to see that you have people interested in this subject. I'm also happy to welcome some of the new people to Theosophical lectures. And for those who are new, I'd like to say that the Theosophical Society is a non-dogmatic organization with a non-dogmatic philosophy, with the principal aims of the search for truth and for universal compassion. Therefore, we don't impose any beliefs, and we don't expect any practices from people, except that you go inward and search for the truth. In Europe, I had some interesting conversations, and we investigated together the subject of karma. We also, karma being the law of karma, action followed by equal and opposite reaction. We also spoke a little bit about dharma, or our own duty or calling. What is each person's dharma? Or even religion, it has many meanings. We spoke about mindfulness, which is again an important quality. We spoke a little bit about nirvana, but you can't talk about nirvana because, to the best of my knowledge and memory, I haven't attained nirvana as yet, so I'm not really competent to talk about it. But these other subjects were very interesting, and we also thought we would look at yoga. As you all know, yoga is a very popular subject all over the world, and it is perhaps the most misunderstood subject in today's world, because people think yoga is for health and only for health. And so you have yoga gurus, you have yoga classes, you have diplomas in yoga, all kinds of things. And people also practice breathing. They call it pranayama. But from the theosophical point of view, yoga is very much more holistic, and historically it is a part of the whole body of Hindu philosophy and epistemology. Hinduism is a very ancient religion, and in fact it's not a religion in the common sense of the term. It is called by another name, and the other name is Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal Dharma, the eternal religion or calling or the property. When I say property, it doesn't mean properties that you own, but like physical and chemical properties, it's that calling from within, your property. So Hinduism is very inclusive in its true sense. Although in recent times you find that people talk about Hinduism as a religion which excludes. That's not correct. Sanatana Dharma would include Buddha, Christ, the Prophet Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, Moses, Mahavira, anybody as a Hindu or a teacher of Dharma, because all of them taught Dharma. Traditionally, there are three important texts in Hinduism, which together are known by the term Prasthanatraya, the three sources of knowledge. And I'm sure that many of you have heard about these three sources of knowledge. One is called the Brahma Sutras. As you know, Brahma is one aspect of the Trinity, and the aphorisms are called Brahma Sutras. The second are called the Upanishads. You know, there are many Upanishads, and they have been authored thousands of years ago. And the third is the most popular of the Prasthanatraya, and that is the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita was given during the great battle, fratricidal battle of the Kurukshetra, which is part of the second great epic of India. One is the Ramayana and the other is the Mahabharata. And the battle took place at almost the end of the second story, although there are more stories after the battle. So the Bhagavad Gita was a conversation between Sri Krishna, who is the Hindu Christ, so to say, with his disciple, brother-in-law and disciple Arjuna. But our subject this evening is not the Gita but yoga. Having stated the three important sources of Hinduism, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that Hinduism has both secular, or Sanatana Dharma has both secular as well as religious scriptures. The secular ones are texts, we can't call them scriptures, and Then there are the spiritual writings. There are 4 branches of secular writings in Hinduism, and there are 6 branches of other uh, uh, other writings or scriptures. I will start with the secular because that's interesting in certain ways to some people. The first of the secular ones are called Subhashitas, which means the art of speaking. The second are called Kavyas or poetry, because we have a lot of poetry in Eastern literature. The third are called the Natakas or the Natyas, which have to do with the performing arts. Many of you would be familiar with the various forms of dance like Kathakali, Odissi, Bharatanatyam in India, and the various schools of music. So the performing arts form one more. And finally there are the Alankaras. The Alankaras meaning the adornments or the embellishments, the different kinds of jewelry and a whole science that is related to that. So all that is also part of the great Sanatana Dharma. Then Sanatana Dharma has 6 other branches which are spiritual, as I said. The first of them is very important. It is called Shruti, which means transmitted by sound. These were given from one generation to another and passed on by word. It was the word, and it was by listening. The key word here is listening. And the Shrutis included the Vedas, which are very important texts. Then come the Smritis, which are various aspects of religion given by memory. So they have to do more with the outer form and hence inferior to the Shrutis. But they are also very important. So that word which was transmitted and then the Smritis. The third is called Itihasa. Itihasa has to do with the history of great personages. And Itihasa, like you have biographies and autobiographies, Itihasa was the story of the great personages in the history of that part of the world. Then you had the allegorical texts, which have enormous esoteric meaning, and they are called the Puranas. And the root meaning of the word Purana means ancient. So they were ancient allegorical texts, and these have a lot of meaning. When you read the secret doctrine of H.P. Blavatsky, you see a lot of reference to the Puranas in that. Then you have also the Agamas. The Agamas are the method of worship, the science of making of the temples and all that stuff, which is a very vast science by itself. And Agamas contain so many things. So that is the fifth. And the final are the darshanas or the demonstrations. Of course, our subject this evening is not to go into all the darshanas, because you're all intelligent people, you can refer to the internet and to various books. But I will just mention the darshanas. There are also 6 darshanas. And just like Shat Sampatti, there are Shat darshanas. Shat meaning the 6. Now, the first of these is called Nyaya, which has to do with logical reasoning and judgment, and is attributed to one of the 7 great rishis, Gautama Rishi. Then there is Kanada Rishi, who brought out what is called Vaiseshika, which has to do with some things with the universe. I will not get into those things. Then in theosophical literature, we speak a lot of the great Kapila, Rishi Kapila. So the Sankhya philosophy was a child of Kapila. And today, there are scientists who are trying to investigate what Sankhya's are all about. The Sankhya Karikas or the aphorisms of the Sankhya philosophy are being interpreted not only as spiritual texts, they are also being interpreted as physics, formulae, and there's a man who has worked them up to the 38th decimal place to try and find out what they say about the origin of the universe. As you know, the Theosophical Society has theosophy and science, and they talk about mind over matter interaction. They conduct experiments like occult chemistry. They talk about distant viewing that H.P. Blavatsky performed by writing from various books sitting in one place without the internet. They talked about occult chemistry where they enumerated the subatomic particles before the electron microscope was invented. We won't get into that. The last two branches of the Shad Darshanas have to do with Vedanta. One is called the Purva Mimamsa, which is a school of Vedanta, and the sage associated with that is a sage called Jainini. And finally, the great Vyasa, who is also called Badarayana, is associated with the Uttara Mimamsa. So this has to do largely with those forms of Vedanta. We have the spiritual texts called the Vedas. You know, the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda. The last of these has to do with various kinds of occult practices. But the end of the Vedas are called Vedanta. And this has to do a lot with the kind of theosophical thinking. And one of the greatest teachers of Vedanta was Adi Shankaracharya. And of course, I have left yoga for the end, the 6 darshanas. When enumerating, it is not made the 6th, but yoga came a little before. And the main person who is associated with yoga is Patanjali. Now the sage Patanjali had an immense impact in Hindu literature and also to a great extent has had an impact on theosophical literature. And our connection with Patanjali is primarily through Dr. I.K. Taimani, who is the author of the book The Science of Yoga. So if anybody talks to you about yoga, please refer them to the book by Dr. Taimani. And it is called The Science of Yoga, which has the translation and the commentaries on the 4 chapters of yoga. They are called Samadhi Pada, which means when you say Pada, it means the path of Samadhi, Sadhana Pada, that of practice, Vibhuti Pada, and finally Kaivalya Pada, which has to do with liberation. If Jan wants to say something now about this in French, about what I have spoken.
So for me it's not necessary. Pour toi, tu veux qu'on français? Tu veux qu'on explique?
Ça va?
Ça va.
Il a positionné le yoga dans tout le système d'écriture philosophique et religieuse indienne. Et ça fait partie des 6 philosophies indiennes. Il a bien positionné le yoga dans tout le système. Et là, il a commencé avec Patanjali et les 4 chemins. Les 4
Quatrième chapitre. Il y a 4 chapitres, il a parlé du 4e chapitre.
Il a nommé tous les 4.
Oui, mais il a parlé principalement le 4e chapitre.
Kaivalya is liberation, the path of liberation, final chapter.
Jean-Louis, ça va?
Ça va, merci.
Tout le monde content? Everybody happy? So,
Or unhappy. It doesn't matter. It's only two sides of the same coin. I must tell you that when we speak of yoga, there are 8 parts, and that is why it's called Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga, 8. Okay. And for the theosophist, some parts of yoga are not really interesting, which is also important for us to understand. That is Hatha Yoga, which is part of the Eightfold Path. Adi Shankaracharya, or the great Shankara who came after Buddha, had a very strong opinion, very similar to theosophical literature about Hatha Yoga. Swami Subbarao, who has written, or whose writings have been compiled in that book Esoteric Writings, he says that Shankara had a great difference with Patanjali because of the inclusion of Hatha Yoga. And the Mahatma letters also say that it is Raj Yoga that is important for the theosophist, not Hatha Yoga. It's been repeated many times because the obsession of the attention to the body and whatever else that is related to the lower personality is ultimately not important in the Hindu school of thought. So getting back to the Eightfold Path, you might ask, where does Shankara come in here? It is because Shankara's commentaries and Shankara's philosophy, like the philosophy of Buddha, the two are very closely linked with theosophy in many ways. And if you looked at esoteric Christianity or the esoteric aspect of any religion, it would be more or less in line with the teachings of the Buddha and Shankara. Many people mistake that Shankara was born a few hundred years AD, Anno Domini. But it is true that Shankara was born between 51 or 52 and 60 years after the Buddha and completed some of the tasks that the Buddha did not had left to be completed. And Shankara's teacher was Gaudapada, and Gaudapada's teacher was Patanjali. He preceded Gaudapada, I don't know about teacher. So at that time, Shankara had a difference on this Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Now we'll investigate this together. Now the Eightfold Path of Yoga has 2 classifications. One is called the external, that means the outer yoga, and the other is called the first is called Bahiranga. Bahar in Hindi means outside, and then Antar means inside, even in Hindi, not only Sanskrit. So the second part of it is called Antaranga, which is the internal part, the esoteric part. And that is the part that's interesting to theosophists, obviously, because we like to investigate into the inner aspect of life. The 8 parts of yoga are divided into external and internal as 5 and 3. So the 5 are yama, which are vows of self-restraint, niyama, which are certain observances. Then come this asana and pranayama. Asana are the various postures, yoga exercises which they teach you. And pranayama is the breathing exercises and the regulation of breath. And then the 5th is called pratyahara, which is again very interesting. It is to do with abstraction, which means that the yogi tries to cut off the messages from the senses and he insulates himself. You would have noticed in the most common way that if you're concentrating very deeply in a book, you don't hear the things that are happening outside. You're so immersed in that book. If you are seeing a movie, or maybe on television, somebody comes and taps you, you don't feel the touch. You're concentrating on that. Similarly, if you cut off all the senses, that attempt is called, or that effort is called pratyahara in yoga. And they say that to go within, you need to put an end to the senses. Patanjali says, and then of course the three inner parts of yoga, and they are called dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Everybody knows about samadhi because they have heard about it. Dharana in simple English language means concentration. Dhyana in simple language means meditation. And samadhi strangely has two ways of interpreting it, but the meaning is the same. The literal meaning means trance. You know what trance is. But it also means union. So it's the trance of union. And the three together, dharana, dhyana and samadhi, form what is called samyama. Patanjali has used this word samyama, and together samyama means Raj Yoga. Now, before we start looking or even considering samyama, we have to go a little before and try to find out what is the central purpose of yoga. Patanjali says yoga has chitta vritti nirodha, which means yoga is the inhibition of the modifications of the mind. Now, this is very interesting because H.P. Blavatsky says the mind is the great slayer of the real. O Lanu, slave the slayer. So Lanu means disciple. But obviously, both Blavatsky and Patanjali are not recommending insanity. You understand? We say he lost his mind, which means he lost his sanity. It's not so. So obviously there is something that is beyond. And Krishnamurti very interestingly says, he speaks of the experience of the silent mind. So in effect, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, or the stopping or the inhibition of the modifications of the mind, literally refer to this silent mind, this mind that has been put to rest, and also refers to a certain quality called the stable mind, which in Sanskrit is called sthita prajna. It's a stable mind, it's an even mind, it's a contemplative mind, but at the same time not an excited mind. Okay? So, if we understood what yoga is, it's almost said in the very second aphorism of the first chapter. He says this. But let's go back and consider yama and niyama, because they are among the most important parts of living, day-to-day, self-restraints and observances. Even in a game of soccer or football or a game of cricket or basketball, you have rules. And in yoga, you have rules. You're not expected to do yoga, to get into yoga without knowing the moral and ethical basis of yoga. There is no spiritual life. There can be good health, because if you stretch yourself in the right way, if you breathe in the right way, if you eat the kind of food that you're supposed to, your body will live longer. Very good. There's nothing wrong about it. As the At the Feet of the Master says, the body is like your horse and you have to maintain it. But there is an ethical side to yoga which is very important for us to understand, because that takes us further. The ethical side of yoga consists of yama and niyama. The bowels are self-restrained. So, in the can you translate before I go into that? Because I have to recapitulate something. Yeah.
Il y avait 8 éléments du yoga, et parmi ces 8, il y a 5 et 3. Et 3 qui ont à faire avec la concentration, la méditation et le samadhi. Et les 5, il y a le plus important, il veut parler maintenant des yamas et des niyamas, des observations et des vertus. Il va parler des yamas et des niyamas.
Yeah. Can you remind me which is the first of the yama? She would know.
Ahimsa.
Yes, thank you. Ahimsa is the first of the yama. And very strangely, ahimsa is brought forward first because ahimsa has to do with abstention from cruelty. So, whatever you do in life, don't let it even remotely be cruel. And we think cruelty means something where you take a knife and cut something or you hit something. That alone is not cruelty. The thoughts you think, the words you speak, and your actions are all together can be cruel. So therefore, you must think, am I thinking a cruel thought? Because that's where it all begins. Am I saying something that's cruel without knowing it? And am I doing things which are cruel? Very often we do not investigate what cruelty is. In the way we eat, we should ask, is there cruelty? In the way we dress, we should ask whether there is cruelty. In the way we invest our money, we should ask, is there cruelty? You don't need to do anything about it, just ask the question. For example, it is very common in all parts of the world and even in India that people eat animal food. Statistics say that a human being consumes 7,000 animals during his lifetime. If he consumes animal food from his childhood till his old age. Then you have the investments that we make. There are huge number of investments that we make in businesses which are cruel. Cruel to the environment, cruel to animal life, cruel to human beings. Okay? And we are seeing even today that people do not take cruelty to the environment seriously. It is very important to see that pollution is brought down and that the world is kept a safe place, that animals are taken care of. I was once visiting a factory in Denmark because by profession I'm a human resource management consultant and I have many European clients. One of my clients, they make pumps, water pumps, and next to that is a place where they slaughter pigs. And the Indian managing director who was taking me very proudly told me, not the Indian managing director, somebody else who was taking me, very proudly told me, in goes the pig and out comes the can. Meaning that 6,000 pigs are made into cans with bacon every day. And if we consider in India people wear silk saris, very elegant. All the Indian women like silk saris. Each silk sari has 6,000 silkworms which are boiled in hot water and killed. Boiled and killed. And then a beautiful sari is made out of that. And they wear it. And they wear it for weddings, happy occasions. You see? And For example, when we have, is it Christmas or Easter, that the turkeys are slaughtered, there's a massacre of turkeys. And then you have leather. A lot of people say, oh, leather comes when the animal is dead. But if you did not buy leather, if you did not use leather, that's one more reason why animals would not be killed. So, when there is ahimsa, one has to be completely mindful on why you should have ahimsa. It is closely related to the law of karma, where every action that you do gets back to you as an equal and opposite reaction. So, if you are cruel to your children, you would face cruelty at some time. If you are cruel to your subordinates, you would face cruelty at some time. If you are cruel to your students and you are a teacher, you would face that sometime. And that's why the theory of reincarnation is closely associated with karma, although the twin doctrine is of karma and nirvana, but this is very important. And ahimsa is that part of yama which is closely related to karma. The second of the yama is satya. Now, satya has to do with truth. And very often we ask the question, is it important to speak the truth? What's wrong in speaking a lie? What's wrong in speaking a lie? Why is it something inside you tells you, hey, you're speaking a lie, and why does it make you uncomfortable? Why is it you get hurt when somebody speaks a lie to you? Huh? If somebody says something which is untrue, why do you feel hurt about it? You have to go inside and find out. It's a very subtle human feeling that you should speak the truth. Because in the world of ethics and morals, truth comes first. And there are people who have given their life for truth. They could very well have spoken a lie and got away with it. So, this whole question of truth is central to a theosophist because our motto is Satya Nasti Paro Dharma, which means that there is no dharma higher than truth. In Munich, when I gave a public talk a few days ago, somebody was debating with me the meaning of the word dharma. But I wanted to tell you that H.P. Blavatsky and H.S. Olcott were very intelligent people besides being very spiritual people. And they chose among the many meanings of the word dharma, they chose religion. Because in a way we study religion, philosophy and science. It has got nothing to do with duty, with charity, with any other thing, but our purpose is religion. And hence they translated, there is no religion higher than truth. Which means that truth has to be investigated at all costs. But we must understand that in order to know the truth, the first thing is not to indulge in falsehood, isn't it? Because it's common sense. If you are going towards truth, falsehood is like moving in the opposite direction. So in everything that you do, if you are truthful, you progress. But if you speak lies, you indulge in falsehood, you regress. And remember that truth as far as you are concerned is relative. There is no absolute truth. The absolute truth is not known to you. What was true yesterday is not the truth today. What is true today is not the truth tomorrow. So never mix up your belief and your perception with the truth. What you see now is your belief and your perception. What you would see tomorrow is a better belief and a better perception. But on the other hand, if you want to cheat yourself, if you want to cheat others, then you would go to the path of falsehood, and therefore truth is further and further away. There are people who indulge in corruption, There are people who indulge in suppressing their conscience and doing things which are against the path of truth, and they regress more and more and more. They create more karma for themselves and they will have to pay. Many of my friends are very cynical. You know the word cynical? They say, you're talking about karma. I see all these bad guys doing everything that they want and they're very happy. I don't believe that. And even if I see that in the phenomenal world, I'm inclined to think that there has to be some sanity. We live in a cosmos and not a chaos. And in a cosmos, truth is very important. In a chaos, truth is the first casualty. Then the third of the yama is asteya, that is abstention from theft. Most often people think theft is of a material object. If I come to somebody's house in the middle of the night and I steal the lamp there and run away with it, they think that is theft. But that's not the only thing that can be stolen. You can steal power. You can steal so many things which are not yours. You can interfere in somebody else's relationship and steal emotions. You can steal money. You can steal anything. You can steal a reputation. You know many people who are actually dishonest. They project an honest image, which means that they are stealing a reputation that does not belong to them. Very often we don't even notice these things. We don't realize that somebody who puts up a facade, that somebody who puts up a show, he is accepted or she is accepted as being what they project themselves to be. But not only is satya at stake, but they are also thieves, so asteya is also not practiced. Do you understand? So this becomes a very important thing that we should observe ourselves and say, oh, this is not mine. I can't put my name below somebody else's writing. You understand? I can use it, but I cannot say that I suppressed the source and I did it. There are people who steal inventions from others. They infringe copyright in the business world. So all that, somebody has a nice business, they go in for a hostile takeover and they manipulate and take it over. All this is asteya. So in the way you do business, in the way you conduct your lives, there has to be total absence of theft. So let us not think that theft is only the job of a burglar, but we are also people who steal. In as much as cruelty, we talk about the terrorists, we talk about people going to war as being cruel, but we practice cruelty, and that's why there is terrorism in this world. So we have the responsibility for theft, for terrorism, for cruelty, as long as the last person in this world practices it. Because if it is in your mind, it is like a pebble in the pond. You drop it and the ripples spread far and wide. And somebody picks up the power of your thought, because today, mind over matter interaction with the experiments of William Tiller, of Roger Nelson, Rupert Sheldrake, the Weizmann Institute on behavior of the electron particles and waves, or the Japanese guys, so many of these have shown that mind over matter interaction is possible. So you are releasing with your mind thoughts of theft, thoughts of cruelty every moment if you practice that. So don't even look at the acts and words, those come later. Control the mind. Then we go to another important subject. It is called Brahmacharya, the most misunderstood of all the teachings in Patanjali and in Theosophy. Brahmacharya literally means continence, which means control in matters of sex. A lot of people think that Theosophists should be celibate, that they should not have sex. Please don't believe that. First of all, that is really stupid, because then the next generation will never come to theosophy, because there will be no generation. But the obsession with sex, the way in which we look at people and our mind works over time, the way in which we treat people of the opposite gender, make them sexual slaves, all this should be avoided. The way there is sex for money and there is no love in that relationship, this is one more thing which is not good. But at the same time, there is no interference as far as brahmacharya is concerned for the normal person who practices yoga in terms of his sexual relations with somebody with whom there is love in that relationship. So brahmacharya is not celibacy, it is continence, which means there is control of thought, word and deed. Of course, the purpose of sex is for procreation, but it does not happen unless there are two people, and hence it cannot be logical to say that it is not required. Very much later in one's spiritual progress, total brahmacharya, total absence becomes a natural part of life. A very important thing. There are two ways to handle any drive. One is to yield to temptation. The minute I am tempted, I go and do that. And the other is to completely suppress it and say, no, that's wrong, I will not do it, being dogmatic about it. But the right way to observe matters like this, particularly in terms of brahmacharya and other things, is to observe yourself. Why am I thinking this thought? And then, instead of suppressing, instead of yielding, understand it. You understand it in a manner that's not only subjective and objective, but in a very clear manner where you know why you're thinking that way. The last of the 5 yama is called aparigraha. Aparigraha has to do with acquisitiveness. And acquisitiveness is the order of the day today. If I see my neighbor having a Bentley or a Maybach, I want it. Because, something tells me that I'm inferior to him. I have a different car, I have to have that. If he has a larger house than mine, I want it. If I go into a shop where they say discount, I don't care what I buy, because it's on discount, I buy. And I have my house full of junk, because I buy everything that's available in the market, whether I need it or not. So the first question is, think about the people in different parts of the world. You know that to get 1 square meal a day is a big effort for certain people. Very big effort. They don't have food. People pick up food from the dustbin and they eat, from the garbage cans and they eat. And they are human beings like you and me. And they're hungry, so they go there and eat. Whereas, if we had the opportunity, we go and buy designer clothes. We spend millions of rupees on plastic surgery and Botox and all kinds of indulgences, including buying up businesses, building extremely lavish houses, not asking the question, do I need it? Now this question is not for one who's not on the spiritual path. But if you are, please ask the question every time you buy something, do I need it? And am I letting myself buy things which I don't need, things which I will never use? So, and afterwards question that need. I find that there is equipment available for everything. There's equipment for squeezing a lemon, there's equipment for slicing bread, there's equipment for making coffee, getting you from one place to another. There's equipment, gizmos as we call it in modern English language, gizmos for everything. You have complicated mobile phones with which you're obsessed. So there's equipment for everything. And the minute the advertisement comes out by a technical company saying, this car can do everything for you. It has park assist, so that you put it in the reverse gear, you don't need to learn to park. It parks for you. So then you need to ask, how much extra do I pay for that? Oh, you don't pay very much, just about another 10,000 euros maybe. Oh, that's all right, that's not much, because for you 10,000 euros is not much. But there is somebody who earns €1 a day. Think about him, think about his family, and say, maybe I will learn to reverse my car myself without having to use park assist. What I say may not be very nice for people who sell expensive cars. I used to love expensive cars, I still like cars, I admire them, but at the same time, I ask myself, do I need this? So, aparigraha is something that you need to understand when you see something, and also there are people who want to possess, they want to possess other human beings. You see something, you don't admire it and leave it at that. You see a flower, you don't admire the flower, its beauty. Or you don't admire the beauty of a human being. You want to possess that person. You want to pluck the flower out. So that's why there was something on Facebook which was very interesting. It said, what is the difference between I like it and I love it? So I like it means I see the flower and I pluck it. I love it means I water the plant so that the flower stays there forever. So acquisitiveness is sometimes with human beings. And you face the negative consequences of this when you want to be possessive about your children when they grow up. Slowly let them go. I have a major problem personally with this because I'm very protective about my children. I'm sure many of you are protective about your children. Up to a certain age, it's all right. But acquiring more for them, more for this, holding on. So finally, aparigraha has its impact on other forms of life. Now we've dealt with the five. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Now we go into what is called the observances, because after all, if you have to progress in your spiritual path, suppose you're a sports person, you have to run every day and keep your stability, otherwise you go to a soccer match and you do that, nobody will take you in. So for the spiritual person, the practice is the observances. What are the five? Saucha, Santosha, Tapas, which is written as Tapaha, Swadhyaya and Ishvara Pranidhana. I will go into each of these. Saucha means purity. Okay. Now what is purity? Is it washed clothes? Is it the best gold you can buy? Or what is purity? Or is it that I speak pure English? Does that make a difference? No. It's useful for me to know English, or French or German, but purity is from inside. It does not go away with any number of paths that you have. So you cannot become pure unless your heart is pure. And what is a pure heart which H.P. Blavatsky speaks of in her The Golden Stairs? Intention. When you meet somebody, very instinctively you know the person's intentions. It seems to come in the person's eyes, in the body language, in many things. That's why little children and animals observe them. They're not comfortable with everybody. The dogs, they will not like certain people. Little children, they will not come near anyone. You can force them, but by themselves they will not. They sense. And sometimes the people in the opposite gender, for example, if there are some intentions in a man's mind, the woman sees it and she, for some reason unexplained, she keeps away. So at that time, you must find out, is there purity? It doesn't mean that being attracted to people is impure, but there are many things that are not pure in your intention. And that intention becomes very important in our daily lives, because you might not notice it, but people see your intentions. There is a in behavioral science, which I have studied, there are 4 quadrants, and it's called the Johari window. Johari is an Indian name. In the 4 quadrants, in one quadrant, there is something that you know about yourself, but others don't know about you. In another quadrant, in that 4, it's something that others know about you, but you don't know about yourself. And then there is that part of you which neither you know nor do others know about you. And then there is that which is you know about yourself and others know about you. They say this 4th one is something which has to be very big. That means you're an open person. You don't lie. If somebody asks you, what do you think of the present government? It's not that you should always give your opinion, but if you speak a lie, then that means there is something that you know others don't know. And there are circumstances under which some of your drives come out which neither did you know nor did others know. Under circumstances of fear, of danger, many things come out. But if you are a meditative person, then almost everything is what you are inside is what you are outside. And there is total purity. Intention and practice are one. The second is called Santosha, and it is very closely related to Aparigraha, which I spoke about. Santosha means contentment. People who are happy. There are people in India who are very, very rich, and there are people who are very poor. For example, one rich person has built a 27-story house with a helipad on top for $2 billion. Of course, he has the freedom to build because $2 billion is nothing for him. And there are people who have almost nothing. But everybody seems to be having a problem. Oh, I don't have enough. I am not well. I'm not well. Constantly they are unwell. I don't have money. Again, in transactional analysis, there is this book by Eric Berne, which you can read. It says, I'm okay, you're okay. It's a very interesting book in transaction analysis. There are 4 quadrants again. In one, it is, I'm okay, you're not okay. That's a very, very aggressive attitude. The other one is a very submissive attitude. I'm not okay, you're okay. Which means everything is wrong with me, everybody is better than me. You understand? Then there are some absolutely negative people. Totally negative. I'm not okay, you're not okay. And then there are people who are, I'm okay, you're okay. It's exactly like the other 4 that I mentioned. In our attitude, this becomes very, very important. And contentment comes when you say, I'm okay, you're okay. I'm okay, my children are okay. Okay, they might not be, they might have some strengths, some weaknesses. Your spouse might have some strengths, some weaknesses. Your friend might have some strengths, some weaknesses. But we are content because, and we should not be unhappy with circumstances. What is now is the best. This is the attitude that you should take. What is now is the best. Of course, it doesn't mean that you should not aspire. It doesn't mean that you should not improve. It doesn't mean that you should not earn more. But to be constantly complaining, stop it now. Stop complaining about anything in your life. Because if you complain, you attract things which are negative. But if you are grateful for what you have, then it's the story of the half cup. Is it half empty or half full? If you say half full, you feel fulfilled. If you say half empty, then you're only seeing the empty part of your life. So contentment has something to do with that. In our daily life, contentment is very important. Otherwise, we are very sad and miserable people. But if you are grateful people for what I have, you need not compare. It makes a big difference. So we talked about Saucha, purity. We talked about Santosha, or contentment. The third, see, the next 3 form a school of yoga. And this school of yoga is called Kriya Yoga. Very often you see that the Self-Realization Fellowship of Paramahamsa Yogananda, the author of the great book, Autobiography of the Yoga, of the Yogi, he speaks about Kriya Yoga. And the last 3 steps of Niyama form that important part of Hindu philosophy called Kriya Yoga. What are they? Tapas or austerity. Now, when you talk about austerity, it doesn't mean that you go out into the cold weather without warm clothes. It doesn't mean that you give up food. It doesn't mean that you suppress your needs. But austerity is the gradual questioning, as I said, and the gradual observation and doing away with things that you do not need. You can't do it in a day. That would be suppression. But if you observe every day and say, do I need this? Do I need that? Then there will come a time when you don't feel cold, when you don't feel warm, when you don't feel hungry, when you don't feel thirsty. Not because you suppress, but that austerity, tapas, also means burning away. That's why it's so important that the human being, the third object of the society is to investigate these powers latent in the human being. You have enormous powers. You can do whatever you want, starting from the body. You don't need glasses to read. You don't need walking sticks. You don't need people around you to support you. You don't need money. You don't need any of these things. Because finally, if you observe it, it begins like drug addiction. I want this, and I'm dependent on it. Like I have a big problem personally. I like air conditioning. So, there's always a battle in the bedroom between me and my wife. I like the air conditioner coming through the fan, and there I am feeling cold and nice, and she is all rolled up like a silkworm in the quilt. Mm-hmm. But this is an addiction. And it gives you sinuses, it gives you cold, you don't care. So slowly, when I come to Europe, there's no air conditioning here. So I know for more than a month there will be no air conditioning. But the weather is good, except maybe in Spain it was almost 40 degrees. But I told myself, no air conditioning. So go to sleep. So no air conditioning. So no central heating. No, nothing. Slowly, austerity. And then, we talk so much about knowledge that some of the wisest people don't have head knowledge. They go nearer to the center of life, as it is said in the Mahatma letters. They don't care whether they have knowledge or they don't have knowledge, whether they are learned or unlearned. Doesn't matter, because for them that center is more important. And where is the center? The universe does not have a circumference. The universe has a center in every point. So the center of your universe is where you are sitting, not somewhere else. The center of your universe is where you are sitting. So you must always realize that you should go within to the center of yourself. Then there is true austerity. There is true giving up of the external. There is true living. Then Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is the fourth. Swadhyaya has 2 meanings. One is self-study, and the second is a study that leads to an understanding of the self. It's similar. And why do you need to understand yourself? Because you can try understanding everything else in the world, but unless you master yourself, it's of no use. Because that is where the secret lies, the secret of self-realization. And therefore, Swadhyaya is a subjective and objective examination and an observation of oneself, and mindfulness which really makes you understand who you are at your true value. Sometimes there is false modesty, and Krishnamurti said something very interesting. Like, many people, if you praise, you say, oh, what a beautiful painting. They will tell you, no, it's not very nice, I just tried something. No. And actually, they have a complex, which is not good, A true appreciation of yourself is alright. It doesn't also mean that you should say, look at that lovely painting, I was the one who painted, I'm the one who... That's also a sick mind. So he said, put on humility is in itself a vanity. Put on humility, artificial humility is in itself a vanity. It's a kind of pride. So, people say, oh, he has superiority complex and he's got an inferiority complex. Both complexes are only inferior because you're trying to live up to something that you are not. So when you examine yourself, when you study yourself, you find like a person on the television, oh, I'm doing this, why am I doing this? Why am I behaving so foolishly? Why did I do this yesterday? How better could I have done it? How will I do it the next time? I resolve to do it differently. All these things become very important. We forget ourselves. When there are 10 different people, we forget ourselves and we behave differently. And therefore Swadhyaya helps you center yourself to find out how you are, why you behave like this, how you treat other people. So important. And then it helps you in refinement. And the last of these is Ishvara Pranidhana, which means a total surrender to Ishvara of the highest within you. Now, Ishvara is not somebody sitting on a throne whom we call God, because whether you call him God or Ishvara or whatever, you're giving a word and an image. But ultimately, it is that which you can only realize when you have given up yourself. And you can make images of it, you can put the images in temples, you can worship, or you can have halls like the Muslims do without any image. Whichever way, it is, you have an impression. So get rid of that impression and surrender to that which is unknowable. Surrender to that supreme spirit which you cannot understand with your rational mind. That is true surrender to God. And the real meaning of the word Islam, for example, is submission to God's will. And the true meaning of this whole thing, they've corrupted the word jihad and used it for, they call it holy war and all that nonsense. Al-Jihad al-Akbar in Islam means the great battle between the higher self and the lower self. How you don't go around killing an animal. That is a battle within. So jihad is not putting bombs in places. That's a very stupid interpretation. And therefore, the real jihad is the great battle between the inner person, where the conscience and the intuition will rule, and all other things you fight and kill the various negative drives in you. That is true Ishvara Pranidhana or submission to God. Now, I'd like to conclude with a few more points about yoga. One is, just as he said, yoga has chitta vritti nirodha, which is yoga is the inhibition of the modifications of the mind. In the last, he speaks of a few things in the last chapter, very interesting for theosophists. He says, klesha karma nivrittihi. It literally means inhibition of all kleshas and karmas. Now, karma, akarma, if you choose to call it action as an action, every causative action, which means every action where you have put an intention which is good or bad, where there is a motive of the self, there is an equal and opposite reaction. You empower your thought with the motive, and when your thought is empowered with a motive, it has an impact on the universe. Mind over matter interaction, which I spoke to you about. William Tiller's mind over intention implanted devices. They change the pH of water. That's an experiment where the meditators are able to change the pH of water, whether it's alkaline or acidic. So we must understand that it becomes very important to watch our thoughts. Now, what are the 5 kleshas which we should watch? Avidya, asmita, my mind goes blank suddenly because of the fatigue.
Les 5 kleshas.
Avidya, Asmita.
Moi, je les ai là-dedans.
Don't worry, you find it. I will talk about Avidya and Asmita. Raga, Dvesha, and Avidya. Such an obvious three which I have forgotten. The most important. Yes, thank you so much. So, let us talk about Avidya. Avidya literally means lack of awareness, ignorance, lack of awareness. We perform action without awareness. You start driving a car without knowing the road rules. You start driving a car without knowing the controls. You start behaving in life without wanting to know. And it's a tremendous responsibility. Innocence is different from ignorance. Yes. So innocence is what a child is born with, without the motive of the self. Ignorance is this irresponsible behavior where you hurt other living things. So you act out of ignorance. Not knowing the law of karma is a kind of ignorance. Not as a law, not as a concept, but the fact that you should act correctly. Don't do things because of karma. Some people say, I will not do it because it's bad karma. Very good, but don't do it because you think it's bad karma. Don't do it because it's not the right thing to do. So, avidya is something that you should constantly battle against. And the motto of the Theosophical Society is, there is no religion higher than truth. So, every day, you please progress about becoming more aware, about knowing more, and understanding more of the world around you, understanding yourself, and that is less and less of avidya. But even if you are Ishvara, before there is a shunya, the state of shunya, or when the whole creation goes into pralaya and merges with Parabrahman, the ultimate unknown, there will be ignorance in this universe. But our attempt is to try and see how we fight ignorance in the world, how we bring the light to others, not just for ourselves. Okay, so that is the first one. Then Asmita. Asmita is a very interesting of the kleshas. Asmita literally means confusing consciousness with the vehicle of cognition. I do not know how you would translate it into French. Confusing consciousness, which is pure, with the vehicle of cognition, which is this instrument. This instrument, with its emotions, with its mind, is required for cognition. It's required for performing dharma or action, right? Because you need something, and therefore, as we spoke the other day, tanha, skandha, karma come together to give you this. So therefore, but then consciousness is not this. That's why you have the four Mahavakyas, which says, I am Brahma, that am I am consciousness, etc. So the four, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, Prajnanam Brahma, I am Atma Brahma. These are four from the Upanishads, which say that you are that consciousness, but you are constantly confusing yourself as this. It's not that you are something with the soul and with the spirit, but rather it's a spirit that has a soul and a body. We are always looking at it inward. So this is Asmita. Then Raga and Dvesha. All of you live in a computer world. I say that Raga and Dvesha are so much like the binary system, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. You're constantly making decisions. Raga is being attracted to that which is pleasurable, while Dvesha is a repulsion from what is painful. So it's not what needs to be done that attracts you, but what is nice to do that attracts you. And there is a joke, I have repeated this 2 or 3 times about theosophists, nice to do and need to be done. One is the path to nirvana, okay, and the other is the lecture on nirvana. The theosophist often chooses the lecture on nirvana. He is giving up the path to nirvana. So, because that's an arduous uphill task. So we must understand that we should understand that raga and dvesha are constantly playing on us and taking us from this to that to this to that. So there is no sthita prajna, there is no stable mind. All the time you are making judgments and therefore you are releasing thoughts which have a karmic impact. Which means you have to suffer the consequences of your thoughts. I like this, I don't like this, I want this, I like this, I don't want this. This up and down, it's a restless mind. That's why we get exhausted. Because they are constantly seeking of pleasure, avoiding pain. If you are neutral to the greatest extent possible, which people have demonstrated, I'm not saying it's something imaginary, there is neither raga nor dvesha. And finally, avinivesha, which is this fear of death and clinging to life. This trishna or tanha, as they say in Pali, wanting to hold on to life at all costs. Not because of you're useful or you want to do something. There's always this fear. And therefore, one important exercise in your mind is practice dying every moment. And, right? You die every moment. Not in a negative way. Not in the sense that it's something terribly sad, but you leave behind the past. It's a luggage you don't carry. And therefore, life becomes fresh. Life becomes more livable. Life becomes the attention of the moment. But if you're carrying it with you and you're constantly afraid, oh, will I die, will I die, will I die, do I have to give up? Next life, maybe I'll be born as a beggar. So many fears. I remember a funny thing that happened during one of our workshops. Somebody asked Radhaji, previous president, you mean to say that if I'm born again I have to go to school and study and all that? And then she very seriously said, yes, you have to do all that again. And he was so, upset that he has to go through this whole process again. But the fact remains that you just accept it as it comes. And therefore, running away from a situation is not, is the problem of abhinivesha. Face it, look at it with gratitude, respect the situation, do what is required to make the circumstances more conducive. Lastly, there are three gunas. They are called Rajas, Tamas and Sattva. They virtually pervade everything in the world. Rajas is that which is active. Tamas is that which is totally, what's the right word for tamas? It is stagnant, and then there is sattva, which is really the right balance. Last few days I've been feeling very tamasic, as they say. And I sit in a car, I go to sleep. I'm talking to somebody, I fall asleep. And this is a tamasic attitude. A rajasic attitude is that hyperactive, getting up, going here, doing this, doing that, all the time. There's uncontrollable movements and things like that. Sattvic is that equanimity, that poise in everything that you think and you do. So sattva is the thing. So somebody asked the question, not now, many years ago, why rajas, tamas and sattva? So they said that these three are so important for spirit to experience matter. We speak of the fallen angels, we speak of the interlaced triangles. All these are symbols of spirit falling into matter. And then matter offering experience. And then the spirit rising back to its original state with a refined experience of you as a human being. Okay? There are certain very important qualifications which are required on the spiritual path. Viveka and Vairagya are two of these. Viveka has to do with discernment. It is when mindfulness allows you to focus on something, Viveka always tells you which is the right thing to do. So listen to your conscience, listen to your intuition, and make a choice which will ultimately be your only choice. And having made that choice, exercise dispassion, which is Vairagya. Don't attach yourself even to your choices. Don't attach yourself to your so-called personality. What is a personality? What is it? What is the so-called present? After all, we are all living in memories of the past. We are all living in a world of images, impressions, memories. If I go away from here, I think, oh, this happened. But when I am here, I think that it is happening. If you look at it carefully, all these things are like a movie that's passing on. Every moment seems to be from the past. The stars which you see a billion light years away probably don't exist now. But you see them through the Hubble's telescope. So, are you living in a world that is of this moment? There is no present. And the future is an imagination. Tomorrow there is a meeting. Tomorrow I have a flight to catch. It's based on the memory of the ticket and the schedule that I have to follow. That I have to go to India tomorrow. So, but this moment? No. There's nothing. So, in that silent mind, the true yogi experiences this. That's why you have the last three. Total concentration. That means one point of concentration leading to meditation. Krishnamurti was once asked how to meditate. And he said, sir, that's not the right question. The right question is, what is meditation? A similar question was put to my great-grandfather, who was a disciple of H.P.V. He was asked, what is initiation? Okay, very important. He said, it's not a stage, it's a state. You see the difference? If you are in that state, you are an initiate. If you fall from that, you are not an initiate anymore. It's not like saying, I finished my master's degree, so I am a master of whatever, human resource management or something. It's a state. So, meditation and finally, samadhi or trance. Now, samadhi itself is not spoken of by Patanjali as something which you enter and that's it. He speaks of finer and finer states of samadhi. And what is most interesting is that he starts with samadhi which he calls savija samadhi, or a samadhi in which the yogi has an object of meditation which is the seed. And then he goes on finally, and he comes to another stage called nirbija samadhi, where even that seed disappears. There is no object of meditation, but no yogi, but only the meditation. And then he speaks of the final dharma mega samadhi, which is the highest form of samadhi, where the liberated one, who is called a jivan mukta in Sanskrit, enters. And when he enters that, there is always this choice. Should I get into this? Should I become a pratyeka Buddha? Or should I become take the vow of the Bodhisattva and say, this seed, where there are no karmas, no kleshas, not even the seed and potentiality of any of these things, because it's a totally balanced person. But at that stage he says, I want every human and every sentient being to experience this high state of consciousness or bliss. So, as Krishnamurti said, that his mission was to set man completely, unconditionally free. Therefore, the Bodhisattva says, it's my vow that I will not enter the sea of nirvana or that final dharma mega samadhi, mahaparinirvana, until the last of the sentient beings has had a chance to enter it. It's the ultimate sacrifice, and I think it is the path, the doctrine of the heart as opposed to that of the eye, which is the path of the true theosophist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matteo. Everybody was very, very silent and awake. Great compliment. I think the French speaking have been following the English.
Yeah, unless you would like to say something about it.
No, I think no.
Russians also.
You want to do questions or you want to?
Yes, please. I mean, I don't have a home to go back to here. I have a little hotel room. So it doesn't matter.
Nous avons un peu de temps pour des questions, si vous voulez. On heeft wat tijd voor vragen te stellen.
It's fine. For me, not late yet, because maybe a few minutes. I'm not saying we'll spend an hour.
We have something difficult to understand. One in Samadhi,
Yeah.
at night time, when we see clouds,
When we see
a cloud,
Cloud.
cloud.
A cloud.
Yes, a cloud.
Ah.
After we, comment se dit encore quand on a traversé les nuages?
We crossed them.
When we cross to go on the cloud, it's a liberation then.
it is a
The liberation. Kaivalaya.
rival.
And for me, I have difficult to understand what's a cloud. It's a state, or is in the state is in the cloud or after?
Okay. You see, there are many interesting analogies in philosophy because there can be no description that is accurate of such an experience to fit rational mental interpretation. What happens is that people give analogies. Okay, you know what I mean by analogies?
Yeah.
Like I say, as good as a cup of coffee. But if you have not had coffee, you think it's something. It's like mango juice or something like that. But you don't know what it is. Therefore, every analogy you must throw away. Okay? It has given you what it has to, but it should not be a roadblock. So if the cloud is a roadblock, work yourself around the cloud. Don't stay with the cloud and try to understand the cloud. Because in many cases, your path is your understanding. This is very important for you to know. Because if you want to get stuck in the analogy, nobody can take you further beyond the cloud. But on the other hand, it is somebody else's idea, the cloud. It might be Patanjali's way of explaining it, or the way of the interpreter, the commentator who explained it. It's not yours. So the minute it creates a roadblock, work around it. Leave it alone. Because we are only working on the images. We are working on the image of samadhi, the word samadhi. The minute you define something, be it love, be it self-realization, these are words. Be it Raja Yoga, it's a word. But if you go within, the words disappear, the images disappear, and consequently the roadblocks disappear. For us even to understand our Guru, we have to go beyond images. It's very difficult because in Bhakti Yoga we were talking about it. That finally, no image. So no cloud.
Thank you.
The cloud is gone from now. Yeah, all these are very beautiful expressions that we should not get stuck with. It's important for us to understand. Anything?
I think they're very, very happy. Heureux in French means in the moment. Heureux, dans le moment. Heureux.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important to be happy at the moment.
It is. That is
It's
bliss.
alive.
Ananda. So, yeah. So do we conclude the meeting? So that,
I think so, yeah.
thank you.
You can fly to India.
Say,
Merci tout le monde. Merci beaucoup. Stadssymbool.